handle. Well, half of one anyways. Welcome back to another exciting episode here at the Homestead. I'm Jeff, and this week we are tackling a super fun project that I have been looking forward to for a while. So you probably already know what it is. You saw the title. We're going to be building a climbing wall inside our home gym. So the climbing wall is going to encompass this back portion of the home gym area, roof included. Now, in projects like these, there is really no code and no specifics to build by, but there is still a lot we need to keep in mind because, well, safety is really the primary concern with a build like this. So on the note of structural integrity and safety, there's a few items I just want to point out before we start building. The first, joist hangers. Now, we'll talk in detail why I'm using them later on, but no, we're not just toenailing studs into other studs and leaving it as is. The second is structural screws. Now, we're going to be furring out the walls to create an area of dead space, and I want to make sure those furring strips are attached to our main structure, i.e. the walls of our garage, securely. To do that, we're going to be using structural screws. The first step in this is to attach both my upper and lower supports on the wall and the ceiling. These are going to hold the joist hangers, which are eventually going to house the vertical framing members behind this angled wall. That should hold up just dandy. You'll see throughout this build that I'm using structural screws. Those are those black guys drilled into the main studs of the garage. Now for the angled portion, I attach them to every single stud, whereas on the flat wall, as you'll see later, I use them every second stud. Well, I'd be lying if I said that didn't take a little bit of trial and error. But to give you kind of a rundown of how I figured it out, I started out by figuring out my height and my run out the ceiling, and then I did some middle school math, which is back to your kind of cosine tangent, the SOHCAHTOA days. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a rundown. Figured out all my angles, made all my cuts, and worked on one piece, slowly shaving where I needed to. The only thing this didn't really tell me was where to cut the bird's mouth. I think they call it a bird's mouth. At the bottom, so not only is it resting on the joist, but it's also resting on that 2x6 as well. So with these all in place, I have 2 more joist hangers to hang up top, and then that wall, structurally, is more or less done. As I install the vertical framing members, I'm making sure they're nice and parallel. Having it nice and flat will make it that much easier when it comes time to attach the surface of our climbing wall, or in our case, the plywood. In addition to the main vertical structure behind this angled wall, I added cross braces at every 48 inches. Angled wall is finished off, all braced up, it's looking good, and we can move our focus to the flat walls within the climbing area and get those furred out. Next up, I'm going to fur out the 2 flat walls. Now what I mean by this is I'm going to attach lumber in a perpendicular fashion to the main structure of my garage. Now in this case, I'm using just scrap lumber that I have laying around as long as it's structurally sound. So no cracks, no big notches, no big knots, etc. I want these pieces to be nice and sturdy. Now I'm furring out this wall for 2 reasons. First, I need a bit of a gap between my climbing wall and my main structure. This allows any bolts that pass through the wall that are holding on holds to stop before they poke holes in my vapor barrier. The second reason is my garage is built on a grade beam. This is a 6x6 inch concrete foundational element along the entire outer walls. So by furring out 1.5 inches plus 3/4 inch from my climbing wall, I actually bring the surface past this grade beam, completely covering it up. Look at that, not too bad. Only 1 2x4 short for all of the framing. Considering this was all done out of scrap from the rest of this garage build, I'm pretty happy. Doesn't matter if it's pressure treated or spruce pine fir or regular SPF lumber as they call it. Really makes no difference to me. All it needed to be was structurally sound, and I'd rather use the scraps I have left over than going out to buy new stuff. So, framing's finished up, which means it's time to start putting our walls up in this climbing area. I made a little mock-up of how this kind of hold attaching to the wall is going to go together. So we're going to start with our wall panel, which is our 3/4 inch plywood. We're going to drill a whole bunch of holes in the back in a specific grid pattern. Now, one thing you'll see is my grid pattern is measured according to how I did my framing, so this wasn't totally random in behind here. In each one of those holes, we're going to hammer in a T-nut. That's that little fancy silver guy you see in the back. That T-nut is sitting there to accept these cap bolts. So the cap bolts go through the climbing hold, attaching the hold to the wall. Now you see how that hold, or that T-bolt, sorry, protrudes from the back. That was one of the reasons why we created this extra space. I didn't want these bolts poking through my vapor barrier because, well, it renders my vapor barrier rather pointless. So that is how we're going to hold holds to the climbing wall. I feel like I'm saying holds a lot. This is where the real fun begins. So I start out by measuring and marking all the locations where my T-nuts are going to sit. Now in my case, I chose an 8" by 8" pattern. Therefore, I've got a T-nut every 8 inches in every direction. After the location of every T-nut was marked out, I began drilling my holes. Now a tip I'd suggest here is to drill your holes from the good side, or the side facing outwards. This allows for as little chippage and tear out as possible of the face of your plywood. I used a 7/16 bit. It's what I found was a perfect, nice tight fit for those T-nuts once hammered in the back. Now I say hammered in the back because I chose hammer in T-nuts, specifically 4-prong T-nuts. Well, the majority of them are 4-prong. I did have to settle for a single bag of 3-prong T-nuts because everybody seems sold out right now. Now there are other styles of T-nuts, and from what I'm told, the holy grail of T-nuts is one that requires 3 or 4 little screws to be held in place. They don't strip out and they seem to hold well over time. I, however, just couldn't see myself putting well over 1,000 little tiny screws into the back of these sheets of plywood. I would have been there forever. Now, I may come to regret this decision over time, but only time will tell. So I'm in a bit of a pickle. Originally I'd planned to use full 4x8 sheets everywhere I could, but because I feel very far away. Alright, that's better. So originally I planned on using 4x8 sheets everywhere I could. It just made sense. It's the best use of plywood, least amount of waste, etc. But I got to thinking that T-nut strip every so often on the backside. They do it at the climbing gym. They do it at other people's home walls that I know. And that means replacing them every so often. And taking full sheets on and off, not the easiest task. So now I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to finish this layout, maybe using some smaller sheets just in case those T-nuts need replacing. Easier said than done. Alright, so either I'm going crazy or I sealed my 2-foot level behind one of those sheets. Now I've gone and poked in all the holes just above the studs and I can't feel it. Which sheet do I start with? I want my level back. Oh! Now I'm perplexed. I found it! Let the rescue efforts begin. With the main climbing area done, it was time to turn my attention to finishing off the little end caps on each end, giving it a nice finished look. I'm also going to add a few more holes for T-nuts on the angled section. This gives a few more placements for holds, as well as just some extra area that's climbable. So because we have this joist hanger, and this is why we bought flush guys, the hidden type, we do need to shave a little bit of the thickness of the plywood out, so just a couple of the back layers, so it can still nest behind the front here, nice and clean. Well, the final step in the building portion of this climbing wall is to take a flush trim bit and clean up that joint we just made. So I cut all my plywood slightly long, about 1/8 of an inch, somewhere in there. But I want it to be a nice smooth transition because people are going to be grabbing there, reaching around to grab holds, and I don't want there to be a lip. So we're going to take our router, we're going to put a flush trim bit on it, and we're going to run it up that wall and clean it up. Well, there it is. We have a climbing wall. Super pumped on this project. It is something we've talked about, my wife and I, that is, for years now, ever since we were planning this garage build. The kids are probably even more excited than we are. They're already in here trying out stuff. We don't even have mats yet, so that's going to be interesting keeping them off the wall for now. But if you're new to this channel, or if you're a climber watching this, I am by no means an expert climber or a route setter in any way, but I am a pretty good builder. And that's part of the reason we didn't really get into the technical aspects of the wall, height, steepness of the overhang, all of that. Because at the end of the day, we are a building channel. But if you're wondering, that overhang is about 16 to 18 degrees, somewhere in there. So it's not crazy steep, but it's steep enough you can actually get a little bit of a workout on. And we do have a roof section making it kind of like a cave. On that note, if you're just finding us in general and love building projects, it's stuff like this that we tackle every week, so make sure to smash that subscribe button, click that little bell icon so you get notifications every time we release a new video. And I got a whole bunch more holds that need to go up there, and we got mats coming in, like, well, probably the day you're seeing this we'll have mats, so the kids are going to want them up. So I gotta get back to work. See you next week. So I can't end this video without giving a big shout out to Sarah at Hangdog Holds. She is the maker of all these holds on this wall. Not a sponsored video in any way. Love her product. It's an awesome price. She's a local company here in Edmonton. Make sure to check her out. We'll see you guys next week.